If you can hear me, could you please raise your hand? There is a hand symbol in the top right hand corner. Thank you very much. Looks like everybody's doing that now. Delightful. Thank you, everybody. If you encounter any technical issues during this session, please log out and back in again. I'm flying solo today, so I won't be able to troubleshoot your issues, unfortunately, but I am recording this, so I will be able to send you a recording of the session once we've finished, hopefully tomorrow. That means I'll send it to you tomorrow. It won't finish tomorrow. If you have any questions, you can type them in the chat box in the right-hand corner. Due to the number of people in the session today, it might not be possible for me to respond to you all, but I've tried to preempt your questions in the presentation with some FAQs. And if I don't answer your question, please use my contact details at the end of the session. Here's what we're going to be covering. We're going to look at an overview of the components, the key dates and admin support that you need to know about, and the free resources that are available to you. As we know, the impact of COVID-19 on students and teachers has been significant. All assessments that were due to take place were cancelled in March. Students will be awarded qualification grades this summer based on estimates made by their teachers. As it currently stands, we're still awaiting confirmation from the DFE and Ofqual in regards to any changes that might be made to the requirements of the qualification for the students in the next academic year. Information has been released today about the autumn series for the current year 11s and 13s, but we still don't know about possible adjustments. We hope that the information we need on next year is released before the end of term. When this information is released by Ofqual, we will be in touch to provide you with the guidance you need to move forward. With this in mind, the information I'm going to give you today is based on the assumption that the requirements for the assessment of the components will remain basically the same. We will share with you any new developments and guidance as soon as we can. We put information on our website on all pages in the top right-hand corner labeled COVID-19 update. Plus, we share information through email updates on our community pages and the subject page for drama and performing arts, and through social media such as Facebook and Twitter. So let's have a look at the qualification, and the content has been organised into 3 components. Component 1 focuses on devising a performance from a stimulus text, which is worth 40% of the qualification and is internally assessed. Component 2 focuses on performing or designing for theatrical presentation from 2 texts, and that's worth 20% of the qualification and is assessed by a visiting examiner, usually. And component 3 focuses on exploring and interpreting 2 texts and evaluating live theatre, and this is worth 40% of the qualification and assessed via a written exam. Throughout the specification, there are equal opportunities for performers and designers. Students can do both components 1 and 2 as a performer or a designer, or can perform for one and design for the other. Component 1 can be completed in years 12 or 13. It's internally assessed by you and submitted to us for moderation in the final year of the student's course, i.e. year 13. This is the content of the component. Students will be interpreting, creating and developing a devised piece from one key extract of a play of your choice and applying the methods of one practitioner. There will be a group performance and/or a design realization of the designed piece, and there will be analysis and evaluation of the creative process and the devised performance. The third point here is evidence through a portfolio, and it's important that the process of creating the performance is recorded by the students on a regular basis in order for them to be able to address the statements that must be covered in the portfolio. These are the assessment objectives from the specification. In terms of weighting, AL1, which is about the creation and development of ideas to communicate meaning, is worth 20% in this component, and AO2, the application of theatrical skills, and AO4, the analysis and evaluation of their work, are each worth 10%. In terms of marks, this means that AO1 is worth 40 marks, and AO2 and AO4 are each worth 20 marks. So in terms of translating percentages into marks, it's pretty straightforward. There are two parts to the assessment, and these are intertwined, and it's advisable to consider ways of compiling the portfolio right from the start of the process, with students encouraged to make notes that might be useful for answering the 6 statements from the specification. As I said, the component is worth 40%, and that's the same percentage of marks as component 3, the written exam, i.e. 40%. It's important to remember that the devising component is worth 40%, and therefore it's key that students understand the devising process and how to document their own creative processes. If the students have completed GCSE, they will have the foundations to build upon. And from our perspective, the GCSE and the A-level specifications were developed at the same time. It may be useful to consider trialing a couple of extracts from texts with your students before you choose the one that they'll use for assessment. We've got some guidance on choosing stimuli, on activities to help students create and develop, ways in which you can workshop ideas, and methods of ensuring the process is documented. And it's in our Guide to Devising booklet, which is on our webpage, which I will show you a little bit later on. So students will be working in groups of 3 to 6 performers, usually, to devise a piece of drama. And the group can include up to 1 designer from each design role. So the design roles are set, lighting, sound, and costume. So you may end up in some situations potentially with a group of 10 all working together. The students will document the practical creation and development of ideas, along with the analysis and evaluation of this process and the performance of the devised work. The time requirements for the performance are in the specification according to the group sizes. So you could, if you wanted to, introduce students to a specific extract at the start of the devising process, and this would springboard the early stages of the component. There's no requirement to have any words from the stimulus text in the devised performance, but there can be if they choose to. It's important for them to be able to reference the starting point for the performance in the piece itself. Students have a free choice of practitioner, but should consider the definition of a practitioner that we've stated in the specification. The practitioner selected must not be the same one that is chosen for component 3, i.e. across the qualification, students have to look at 2 different practitioners. But you can use any of those listed in component 3 if you wish. It's not a requirement that all the students in your class, in your group, must use the same text, the same extract, or the same practitioner. Saying that, it's worth considering the practical exploration of different practitioners and texts with them. It really depends on the time you have, the resources, etc., to cover more than one. In terms of timings and group sizes, so they're in groups of 3 to 6 performers, and there can be up to 4 designers working with them. All students are assessed as individuals. One of the changes that we can tell you about now for next year is that if you have small groups, if you have small classes, there is no requirement to use a non-assessed individual in the next series. So usually what would happen, if you've taught this before, is if the students must be in groups of 3 to 6. And say, for example, you only had 2 students in the class. Usually what we would ask is that you find a non-assessed candidate. So that could be another student, it could be a teacher who will work with those 2 students to make the minimum group size. They don't have to participate in any of the devising itself. They can just be there to do the performance. But in the next next year, we will allow students to be able to do either pair work, or in some cases they will do a devised piece on their own. But we will be releasing more information on that. We've also got information in the presentation that we released last week, which is by the lead moderator, Doug Quinn, and I'll share the details of that with you shortly in case you haven't seen it. So in terms of the timings, it's 15 minutes minimum with maximum of 20 for students between 3 to 4, and 5 to 6 performance students 20 to 30 minutes, and that you're required as the assessors to stop marking after the maximum performance time for the group size has passed. So in terms of the regulatory requirements, it's currently that it's 6 minutes. So basically, if students do under 6 minutes, you don't have to award them 0 marks. What we have said is that students who don't meet this should be assessed by the teachers against the assessment criteria. However, students wouldn't be able to achieve beyond level 2. So hopefully you will never be in that position where your students do less than 6 minutes, but that's just there as a safety net. So a couple of questions here. What does it mean for the current year 12 students if I was to perform them in the autumn, if they were to do their performance in the autumn term? So I presume by that question you are referring to the current year 12s who are moving into year 13. Then this rule around non-examining candidates applies. If it's about a group of year 12 students beginning the course in the autumn term, then please be aware that this information around the use of non-assessed candidates is only applicable to those students who will be completing the course in the next academic year. Thank you, Phil, for clarifying that. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. Elise, you've asked about the timings for the duologue, and I think at the moment we are working towards kind of 6 to 10 minutes, but please don't quote me on that yet, because there will be information released from Ofqual about this, and it will be applicable across all the exam boards. So provisionally, that would be the time, between 6 to 10 minutes, but that may change when they release their guidance. So please bear with us on that. Here are some FAQs which you may be wanting to ask. So these are really for those who are, if you're new and you're going to be working with year 13s, or for those who were teaching year 12s last year and who are now progressing. So what happens if the students were halfway through their devising? Are they expected to start again, and can we apply for special considerations? Well, the guidance on this, as we know, is changing all the time, and you know, you may have heard the leaked information about the whole class bubbles and how that's going to work. And what we would say is that if the students are in the same bubble, or you're able to teach them in the original devising groups, then they should be able to continue with the work they've started. Consideration to the style, techniques and structure may need to be amended to accommodate social distancing. And really, you know, the very nature of devising means that work is fluid, and changes often take place at all stages during the theatre making process. And within your centre, you will need to ensure that students work in a safe environment. And if this means that physical work needs to be adjusted to meet social distancing requirements, then this should happen. The details of any changes can be reflected in their portfolio and will be supported by the statements and various assessment objectives. For example, AO1 is looking at how the work is created and developed. And as it currently stands, it's not necessary to apply for special consideration. The second question is, how do we approach devising with social distancing in place? As I said, we've released some guidance on devising at a distance, so remotely, and which you can access from our webpage and our communities page. There's recorded guidance, a presentation, and an FAQ document. But things that you might want to consider in terms of theatrical devices and techniques could be potentially about, and this is in terms of adjusting it, or if the students haven't made that much progress with it so far, but it could be, in terms of the use of monologues, about how, and with that, potentially about fragmented text, the use of overlapping language and connecting phrases. It could be about the inventive use of space and proxemics and use of levels. There are things by well-known materials and approaches like chair duets by Frantic Assembly, but obviously that they're going to then be split and 2 meters apart or 1 meter apart. It may be the use of promenade spacing, the use of mask work for audience and actors, movement motif, split stage devices, solo choreography and unison movement, about moving cannons, the use of direct address, of multi-role, of particular use of gestic props and costumes, the use of placards and narration, the use of voiceovers and projection and video work, and all of these things that you would be considering anyway, and hopefully students are kind of au fait with these different techniques, but just something to consider in terms of how they might be able to adjust the work that they're doing. The next question is about socially distant work for students who are design candidates. If you have sound and lighting designers, then potentially there shouldn't be too many problems around social distancing. It's more to do with the cleanliness of the equipment that's being used, etc. In terms of set designers, then consideration would need to be given as to how props are used and whether props would need to be used at all. And obviously not sharing props and storing them separately and ensuring they're cleansed, and that the that things like painted flats and backdrops and projections may also be one consideration in terms of how the set is designed. For costume designers, it may be that the costumes should be washed in school and taken home and kept safe by the performer, that the performer's family member could take the measurements on behalf of the designer to ensure social distancing, that masks shouldn't be shared, that any makeup or hair design that's part of the costume would need to be designed by the candidate, but then the application of it handed over to the performer following the application guidance carefully. In regards to whether students can perform without an audience, yes, they can. The audience may simply be you as the teacher or the other teachers recording it. It could be another group from the A-level group, or it might be an audience of socially distanced family and friends. I suppose it's what works within your space and protects all those involved. There is still a requirement to record the devised performance for the moderator, and that the moderation process will happen as usual. There may be changes to that, which we will find out. There may be changes around when the work is submitted, for example, so that might be moved back to give you more time. It may be other things that are going to happen, but let's imagine at the moment that things are going to continue as much as they, as as similar as they would do normally. The final question is about the adjustments made for those students who are in Year 12 and have missed over a full term of practical work already. And as I've said, we know we are awaiting information about changes that might be made, and we will share with you that as soon as we know. As soon as we know it, you will know it as well. I can see that there are some questions in. I will try my best to answer those now. So Angela, I think I've answered your question about the aspects of the components being moved. Jodie, you're talking about complicity. And you know, complicity's work has gone through many different stages, and you know, when you compare something like the encounter to Caucasian short circle, the techniques and devices that they're using are so different in that. So I imagine that you're referring to work that kind of earlier work by Complicity with how they move as an ensemble and the use of bamboos and etc. And you know, it may be that some of the work that some of the material that the students have already developed could be reviewed and could be looked at again to see whether or not it is possible to have this idea of an ensemble movement piece, but with just carefully positioned people, so that they're not in these tight groups all working together and moving together, but they are separated, and that more idea of a choreographed canon movement is implemented. So I mean, it depends on what you've done, but hopefully that's useful. The same for you as well, Stacey. That, you know, when you think about frantic, the frantic work again, they've done a lot of different types of work, and the majority of their work is not where there is this close physical contact where they're lifting and moving together all the time. It's broken up. It's broken up with the use of direct audience address and monologues. It's broken up with some kind of semi-naturalistic scenes. So again, I think there's a lot that the students can potentially retain, and with some adjustments, that it may be that they can still achieve a lot of what they wanted to do. And of course, they can make reference to this in their portfolios. There's a question here from Gemma about the portfolios and whether the word limit will be raised. And we don't want we don't want students to have to write now basically a new portfolio. So it's about finding ways in which they can include references to modifications that they've made within the portfolio as it exists, rather than having to start again, basically. Elise, a time frame for further info? Well, as I've said, Ofqual are due to be, they're just releasing information all the time, and they've released information today on the autumn series and the potential appeals process that can happen. So if you're not aware that the exam, there will be like a full exam series for GCSE and A level in the autumn, and we will obviously be in touch with more information about when we have it. So there is a in terms of the time frame, we're hoping that it's due before the end of term. There may also be some form of consultation as well. So that's the situation we are in, basically. There's a question from, what's Angela's question? So Angela has asked, is there any indication at all from the exam board that aspects of the components will be reduced for year 12 going into year 13 because of all the time they've missed due to COVID? I think I've just answered that question. So I hope that helps, Celia, in terms of we don't know yet, and this is an off-qual decision about what will happen. Okay, I'm going to move on now because that is the section on the website where you will be able to download all the guidance I've been referring to on devising at a distance with FAQs. In terms of the portfolio, in order to allow as much flexibility as possible, the portfolio can be submitted in a number of different ways, and students should remain within these limits. It can be submitted in a written format, an audio visual format, an audio format, or a combination. They can also include photographs, drawings, sketches, annotations, audio and video evidence. So you can see the recommendations that we have around minimum and maximum word and recorded verbal evidence. Due to the fact that the portfolio is worth 3/4 of the marks for this component, it's important that students are recording evidence and taking notes of the process throughout the time they're working on it. And it would be sensible to get students into a habit of recording key aspects of any creation and development they take part in. There are separate assessment grids for this component for each of the assessment objectives in the specification. The format that your students should use should be the one that you and they feel most comfortable with. We've got no preferred style, and the focus should be on the content and how the students are recording to the statements in the specification. It's not necessary for all your students to respond in the same way. Likewise, it's absolutely fine if they all choose to respond in the same way. It's important that you find the format that works best for you and them. We don't want you to feel under any pressure to do something different if you're not comfortable with it. It's important at this stage to consider any support you may require with the portfolio. For example, what ways do students have in terms of recording the rehearsals and workshops on paper? If they have notebooks or iPads or cameras, can they use their own phones, etc., to be able to do this? So these are the 6 statements that the students are going to respond to, and these are listed in the specification. And the idea being that the statements follow the trajectory of the theatre making process, basically. So beginning with outlining the initial response to the key extract and practitioner, all the way through to evaluating the creative choices they made and whether or not they were successful in performance. Based on the 2018 and 19 results, the principal moderator advises that the best portfolios were those that responded directly to the 6 statements. Candidates that used the statements often wrote with a greater sense of clarity and structure. Those that didn't tended to fall into generalized reporting or description. And there's a clear link between accurate marking and the use of the 6 statements. Candidates often focused on the stimulus in response to statement 1, and there was no further discussion. Candidates who embedded this discussion throughout the portfolio were able to communicate a more sophisticated understanding of the creative journey and not lose sight of how the extract had acted as a creative springboard for ideas, aims, and intentions. In terms of authenticity and ensuring it's a personal response, the student should write or talk in the first person, like, I did this, I made this decision. The student should be supervised whenever the final version of the portfolio is being completed, but we obviously appreciate that a more flexible approach will be needed this year, especially for those in year 13 completing in the autumn term, and that we will trust you in order to be able to work out how this can be done remotely if necessary. So as I've said, the development of the portfolio should be continuous throughout the process and not left to be completed retrospectively once all the practical work has been completed. You can support them throughout, and the parameters are really that, well, you as the teacher shouldn't write any part of the student's portfolio, but you can help the students understand the assessment requirements of the task. You can provide feedback on a draft version of the portfolio before it's handed in to be marked. The focus of the feedback that you're going to give them at that point must only be on the requirements of the portfolio and the assessment objectives. Any additional feedback must be recorded on the coursework authentication sheet, which is basically the mark sheet. In answer to the questions that are coming in now about, so they shouldn't use we and not they should use I. It's important that the student is able to talk about the decisions that they made. There will be some points at which they will be making decisions together, obviously, and then that's absolutely fine. But the individual's contribution is important to note here, and because what it does is it will empower the student from the start to ensure that they are making contributions. Because if they know that they have to talk about the things that they have contributed to the work on a personal level, potentially it's going to shift the way in which they're going to work with others, because it is really important that they are able to have a contribution and that they're able to talk about the contribution that they made. So everything in balance. There is a place and time for them to talk about what we did, but the student focus should be on what that student did, okay? Now, in terms of the feedback from the last 2 years, unfortunately, we haven't got anything from this year, but these are, I've taken this information from the lead examiner, sorry, not the lead examiner, the lead moderator reports, and these are on our website. So if you haven't had a chance to look at them, they're really useful for all three components, because they give an overview really of the general practice that's going on in centres, and can give some really good examples of positive work and those students that and the work that they did that may have needed more time or focus. So the most popular texts that were being used, I think we will all, everyone will recognise these ones. So we've got Frantic Assembly there, we've got Arthur Miller, we've got Finn Kennedy, Burkhoff, we've got Sarah Kane, and 448 Psychosis is an incredibly popular text in this component and in component 2 as well. Popular practitioners including Frantic, Paperbirds, who they do a lot of really wonderful work on devising, because all their work is devised, and if you have the opportunity to take part in any of their workshops, they've been doing a lot of online workshops recently, then I would highly recommend those to you. Students tended to work most effectively when the subject matter was something that resonated with their own lives and experiences, or when they had done the research, the subject matter in depth to fully understand the issues and characters they were exploring. There's a lot of work in component 1 that is influenced by the use of physical theatre, and moderators commented that when movement material was connected to the ideas in the performance, the result was often powerful and visually engaging. However, when movement or dance was unconnected, it was considered irrelevant and lacked meaning. So I think that's a really valid point in terms of movement sequences within these pieces, that there has to be some connection, there has to be some integration. Several candidates chose to stage their performances in a promenade style. Centres are strongly encouraged to remember the importance of the recording. So if you are going to do a promenade piece, please make sure that the journey between the different performance spaces is minimal, and it isn't like a 10-minute walk, because you shouldn't edit these recordings. They should be continuous. It's really important to note that the recording is should have the best possible view of what's going on. Oh, Marius has asked if Splendid can be used for component 1 and then being able to use Brecht in component 3. Yeah, that's absolutely fine. You can do that. Okay, let's move on to component 2 now, text in performance. This component is externally assessed and can only take place in the year the student is completing the course, i.e. if they're doing it over 2 years, it can only happen in year 13, and that's the same for component 3 as well. The component requires the students to participate in 2 performances or designs using existing performance text before an external examiner and invited audience. Well, that's what usually happens. There may be changes to the requirements, and we'll let you know. So it may be that there is the opportunity to record it rather than have a visiting examiner. There may also be changes to the requirements about what students actually have to do. But again, we will let you know as soon as we know. This component assesses AO2, which is the application of theatrical skills. And the monologue or duologue is worth 24 marks, and the group performance is worth 36 marks. So that's 60 marks in total for this component. These are the key areas of assessment for performers and designers. So it's looking at the particular skills of the role. It's looking at characterization and communication for performers, and designing context and communication for designers. And then it's the interpretation and realization of their artistic intentions. As well as doing the performances or the designs, the students must also submit a communication of intention to the examiner before the performance. And there are no specific marks that are allocated to the completion of this work, but it is vital, it's fundamental that the students are able, that the students do this, because what the requirement is of this is that the student will be saying what this is, what their role is, and what is happening to their character, what are the motivations, and what is their interpretation. So in regards to the examiner assessing this, they need to know what the intentions were with the work that they're going to see. Now, in the majority of work, you would like to think that was obvious, but in terms of how this is going to be assessed, and this is an examination, this is a requirement that students have to do this. It can actually be a really useful thing to do as well, in the sense that it can really sharpen the focus of the students before they perform their work on, oh, this is why I'm doing this. This is my intention. This is the purpose for showing this to an audience, is that I'm doing these things. So you know, I'm not trying to teach how to suck eggs. It's really just to clarify why you're required to, why students are required to do this. The same thing for the designers. So they're going to be, all the students will be writing 150 to 250 words for each role that they're going to do. A couple of questions have come in. Lucy has asked about, do the performances need to be from the same text or different text? They need to be from different texts, Lucy. So across the qualification, the A-level student has to study 5 different texts. So that's 1 in component 1, it's 2 in component 2, and then in component 3, it's the 2 set texts that they're going to choose. So they have to do 2 different ones here. Yes, Matt, I will be able to send this through to you as a PowerPoint. And Oya has asked about, if we only have one student, is it possible to do 2 monologues? It's likely that again that we will relax the rules around the use of non-assessed candidates. So we will be in touch about that one, but it's very likely, yes, that you'll be able to do it. Oh, we're getting all kinds of questions coming in now as people are getting into gear. I can hear the cogs whirring in your minds. So I'll answer a couple more before we move on. Rachel, the same to you. As I've just said, that it's very possible that you won't need to use a non-assessed candidate to do the group performances. And likewise, as we are moving forward with component 1, it may be that for the group performance, instead of doing 3, it possibly to do 2, and that will give you the timings of those when we can. Georgia, yes, you can use Fleabag. Basically, in up to this year, there are certain plays that we've said aren't suitable to use because they're either a monologue or they're not short, or they're not long enough because there's a requirement that they have to be at least 60 minutes. But we have relaxed the rules around the monologue plays, so Fleabag is one that you can do. And in terms of your live performance question, so for component 1 and component 3, your students will be able to use recordings of live productions. We all know that the state of theatre is utterly depressing, and it may not be until the new year at the earliest before theatres will be able to open. So yes, students for component 1 and 3 will be able to use recordings, and this hasn't been made official yet. This will be something that all the boards will be applying, and so take it as read that you can now continue with that and use recordings in those contexts. Okay, so in terms of popular texts that have been used in the past, we've got the group performances. We've got a good selection there. Some really interesting ones, some quite traditional ones. So yeah, you've got things like Abigail's Party in there. You've got Caucasian Short Circle, Girls Like That, Pool No Water. Some good physical theatre pieces there. In terms of popular texts for monologues and duologues, we've got Our Country's Good, Curious Incident, A Doll's House. We've got a bit of Shakespeare being represented, Blackout by Davy Anderson. So some good pieces there. These are not, of course, exhaustive, and they're also just those ones that teachers have used in the past. And so don't think that this is a limited list. You go for it in terms of what you want to choose. The characteristics of top level work included that, well, obviously that the work meets the regulatory time limit and doesn't exceed it, that there's a range of vocal and physical technique evidenced, that the text is sufficiently challenging, has depth, and relates to the experience of the candidate, which seems to make it more effective, that candidates are confident and appear to enjoy or make the most of their performance time, and that there's a real sense of ownership, that they're engaged in the text, and they're well rehearsed and they're slick. So some good ideas there. And we've also got Again, similar for the group work as well. It's the communication between the performers and the audience is sophisticated. That sense of focus and confidence that they have, the depth of the characterization, or if they are multi-rolling, it's done with confidence and with distinction. So here are some FAQs. I can also see some questions that have come in as well. So can they perform from a play they write about as their live theatre response? Yes, they can. Can the practitioner in component 1 also be the live theatre response in the? Yes, that's fine. Yes, they can do that. So another question about component 1, which I actually didn't put in, and kind of relates to what Cecilia is asking there, is with component 1, could they use a play that's also written by the practitioner, so Stephen Berkoff, for example, and then they use Berkoff or Brecht or Frantic Assembly, and yes, that's absolutely fine, and that the live theatre within component 1 that they refer to can also be by that particular practitioner as well. There's Elise has asked about justification of marks and feedback from the external examiner, and well, the issue that we have around feedback for external units, and this applies across every single external assessment that we have, is that we don't provide feedback as such for any external assessment. So I do understand your frustration about not understanding why the students may not have got the marks that you thought that they deserved, but it's not something that we are going to introduce because it's not something that is offered for any external assessment across any qualifications that are offered. It doesn't happen, unfortunately. So basically there are a couple of things there, Elise. One is that there is the post results service that we have, because it may be that the results were incorrect in some way. We do our best to ensure that assessments run fairly and smoothly and are done correctly each year, but there may be an issue. So the first, port of call is to ensure that if you or students are unhappy with any results that you get, that you go through the process that we have available. So that's the situation. Let's have a look at these FAQs now. We've got, can students just do monologues is the first one. And at the moment, there is still a requirement to do a monologue, a duologue, and a group performance, unless the groups are small. But this may change according to the off-call decisions. In terms of only having 2 students do A-level, do we have to use a non-assessed candidate for the group work? And no, you don't. So we will allow you to use 1 or 2 for both parts of the component, but we will release more information on that as soon as we can. Will there still be a visiting examiner? We hope that there will be, but we aren't sure. And it may be that that one change is that you'll be allowed to record the work yourself and then submit it. There may be further adjustments to this component, and that might be in terms of the number of pieces that they do and the timings that are available. And in terms of designers realizing their work with social distancing, as with component 1, lighting and sound may not be an issue, and it's going to be a similar situation with costume and props with that guidance that I gave you before. So hopefully you'll be able to adopt similar approaches. Is there a time limit on live theatre pieces for Edexcel? Do they have to be within 5 years? Well, what we usually say is that the more recent work that you can view is potentially going to be better for students, just in terms of the quality of the filming and the use of technology within the work, and other relevant factors around, the social and cultural contexts. But there isn't a definite time limit. Kim, if you have a particular piece that you're referring to, then please say what it is, because it would be interesting to know what work that's over 5 years ago that you would like to use. I mean, have been incredibly lucky during lockdown in that respect, with the amount of work that has been released for free by some of our most esteemed theatres and companies. And you only have to look at the National Theatre and what they've been able to produce and release. I hope that you saw Small Island. I hope that you've seen A Midsummer Night's Dream that's on this week. I mean, this is absolutely incredible work. So there's also the stuff that is available that you can potentially record. So things like through iPlayer. Um, oh, oh, right, Kim, you're talking about Frankenstein. I don't see why it would be a problem to. It will not be a problem to use Frankenstein, especially because of the fact that it was on 6 weeks ago. I can't even remember what what year we're in anymore, but it was on quite recently, so not a problem with Frankenstein. I was thinking you were talking about, it's a production of Hamlet that was on in 1979 and filmed on a Betamax, and maybe that might not be suitable. Okay, so we're going to move on now to component three, and let's just see. Am I being asked to ask? I'm just having a look here. So, um, wherever possible, the work that you should show to your students should be in English. So, Oya, I would suggest that isn't suitable, to be honest. I would say that you should find work that is in English, like for the majority of it. Um, I think I've answered everybody there, but I'm sure you'll let me know if I haven't. So let's move on now to component three, which is the written exam. And the first exam was sat in 2018, so we've had two series. We've obviously not had this one. The exam is 2.5 hours long. There are three sections. Section A, the students will analyse and evaluate a piece of live theatre that they've seen in light of a statement, and they've got a choice of two statements that they can respond to. And students will be able to take in 500 words of notes on a performance that they've seen. And this section is worth 20 marks. And as you can see, highlighted in yellow and in block capitals, they'll be able to use recordings of live productions in the 2021 exam and also for component one as well. Section B, students will have explored a set text, and they will be asked two extended response questions about how to interpret an extract from the text from the perspective of a performer and a designer. And an extract from the text will be provided in the exam paper. This is worth 36 marks. And section C, they will explore another set text in light of a practitioner. They'll reinterpret the text for a contemporary audience. They will answer one from a choice of two questions from the perspective of a director about either performance or design, and students will need to take in a clean copy of their text, and this section is worth 24 marks. The mark schemes for the written exams provide indicative content. So in other words, that the the mark scheme isn't exhaustive, and it provides suggestions about the type of responses that students could be giving, but will also award marks if there are similar things that haven't been listed. So it's quite good in that way. There's also a level-based mark scheme as well. And so it makes it clear what is expected from students and their answers in terms of content and understanding. A contemporary audience is it's an audience now. So it's a recent audience. It's us basically. Amy has asked about the paper for this year being available to use. I'm not sure about that actually, Amy. It may be that the papers will be used in the autumn exam series. Caroline, we have got on our website the exam questions from 2018 and 19, plus we have 2 sets of sample assessment materials. So there are actually 4 sets of questions that you can have a look at in order to understand what the type of questions that students will be asked, what's happened in the past, to ascertain, okay, well, these are the types of questions that are being asked, so these are the types of questions that I can prepare my students for. These are the set texts for section B, and we've got an interesting mix there of British and international writers, of male and female, of dead and alive, of contemporary and a bit older. Then we have got the section C texts, and there are 9 of these, and these texts will need to be explored in light of a practitioner. We have got 3 of these set texts available for free on our website, and you can download those for free. So we have Lysistrata, Lysistrata, however you want to pronounce it, Dr. Faustus and Wojciech, and you can use those. We weren't able to get the licenses for the other plays, unfortunately, so if you do want to use them, you will have to purchase them and purchase the correct edition. But if you are starting for the first time and there's no budget, or you like the 3 plays that I mentioned, they're available to download from our website. So as I said, those 9 texts for section C will be interpreted in light of a practitioner from a director's perspective. So these are the 8 practitioners that you can choose from, and as I said, you could use any of those in component 1 as well if you wanted to. Just don't, for instance, use Brecht in component 3 and component 1, because that's undermining the rules. In terms of the feedback from 2018 and 19, for section A, the most popular performances that were seen included The Unreturning, Wise Children, which I think is on BBC iPlayer now. It's been on for quite a while. The Jungle, Ear for Eye by Debbie Tucker Green, Woman in Black, classic, Play That Goes Wrong, Birthday Party. So occasionally students were writing about productions they'd seen several years previous, and potentially their memories and recollections lacked a bit of depth and detail afforded by a performance seen more recently. Students who had perhaps seen a two-hander with limited production values or local amateur production were often at a disadvantage. Repeated references to the statement helps keep students on track and ensure they were responding to the question. This is a trait of higher level answers. So a nice tip there for you from the lead examiner. Oh, I've gone, there we go. So for section B, Mackinac was the most popular text chosen, closely followed by Equus, and That Face and Colder Than Here also doing well. Higher scoring students connected the extract to the rest of the performance text and reference voice and gesture in equal measure. A clear working knowledge of the performance text is essential to success, and many students had an impressive idea of exactly how they would stage their chosen performance text. Many centres appear to have developed a collective staging concept, which is understandable, but personal responses with the student's own voice coming through were the most plausible and interesting. Section C, most popular texts were the ones that we have available, Wojciech and Lysistrata, followed by Hedda Gabler and Antigone, and the most popular practitioners were Nihai, Punchdrunk, and Brecht. Sometimes students struggled with the choice of practitioner where the methodologies didn't sit easily with the choice of play text. So that is something to consider. Higher level responses from students included referring to themselves as the director, connecting research into the original performance conditions to the present with insight and respect for the original playwright's intentions, connecting the extract to the rest of the text that they're talking about, tending to choose a practitioner who was more suited to the performance text. The methodologies need to be supported to the text that's being studied. Interesting interpretations that were imaginative and clearly presented for a contemporary audience, keeping their directorial concept at the root of the response while addressing other elements. So some good tips for you there, I think. And then finally, we offer the following advice from the lead examiner that the live theatre evaluation requires detailed notes that go into specific depth and detail from a number of key moments. It's essential that students respond to question 3 as a performer, putting themselves firmly in the role of the chosen performer, which links to what Emma's saying, that as the designer I would, etc. So that's fine. Yeah, you can ignore my previous suggestion if you want. Some design knowledge is desirable, but students definitely need to know how they would want the chosen performance text to be staged. And section C is really quite difficult because it makes numerous demands. So the student should know the whole of the play and be able to connect one scene to another, be confident about their practitioner, have a workable concept, make relevant connections between the OPC and the 21st century, and focus on the question as asked. It's a lot for them to do. Jodie's asked about the recommended amount of key moments. I mean, I would say potentially 4 or 5, but that's just me thinking in terms of, well, we should definitely consider the opening moments, and they should consider those kind of natural points of tension that are created through the work. So obviously it depends on the length of the show, because you might see something, I mean, the majority of the stuff that's on the NT website at the moment, they're all lasting like about 3 hours. So, you know, you've got those moments of how is the tension built leading up to the interval? What is that moment? What's that kind of breaking moment halfway through the second half? How does it end? You know, so maybe think of it in that way, the kind of channel it, the journey through the play, and pick 4 or 5. Okay, so in terms of the website and the support that we have for you, first of all, just looking at this, which is a suggestion of how you might want to plan the course. And it's quite similar to the GCSE one that if you attended that last week. But what we have is that in the autumn term, that you're developing general skills in terms of performance and design skills and knowledge of theatre, and that could be done in lots of different ways through looking at the work of others, of experimenting, trying things out, seeing where they're at, giving them a kind of skills audit to see what they're coming in with, and then potentially beginning with one of the set texts to really set a foundation on what they already know and build up from what they're going to know by the end of the course. So trying to do as practical as possible, but obviously we know that you may be highly constrained in doing that in the next term. So just trying to make it as interesting as possible, but to look at a set text might be a good thing to do. And then in the spring term, potentially beginning the process of devising, but because within devising for A level, they're using an existing performance text as a starting point and the work of another practitioner. They've kind of got some boundaries already that they can work within if they wanted to, because they can take dialogue, they could take the structure of it, they could take characters, and then the characters go off and have a follow-up or whatever it would be. But there's a number of different ways in which it could be approached. But in the spring term, kind of starting the devising process. And then in the summer term, potentially, you don't have to do this, but it could be that the devise work is completed with a performance and the portfolio finished, rather than carry it over to year 13 in the autumn term. But as has been discovered this year, there was chaos, and that wasn't going to be possible. If it hadn't happened, though, if COVID hadn't happened, there are lots of centres who do carry on into the autumn term with the completion of the portfolio and the devise work. In this example, in the autumn term of year 13, it's looking at a set text. So this could be from list C, for example, section C, and then they're looking at the practitioner. The students create the director's concept of the text, reimagined for the contemporary audience. They see more live theatre, and they are developing the performance work for component 2. Usually what would happen is that component 2 would be assessed in the spring term, really starting from the first couple of weeks in January and running through to the end of March. It may be that that is extended next year, or it may be that you have the chance to record it, but that's the usual timing for it. And then the summer term is obviously focusing on the exams for component 3. So they will be preparing the 2 set texts and the live theatre evaluation notes. There may be a change to when the component 3 exam takes place next year, in terms of it being moved back a little bit, but we'll find out that in due course. We have tons of support materials on our website, and we've got a getting started guide. We have course planners and schemes of work. As I said before, we've got a guide on devising for centres, which you may find useful, but just really to get some inspiration if you need it, but also just to see how we suggest you approach it. We've got a guide on interpreting a text for performance, and that can be used in the context of components 2 and 3. We've got detailed set text guides for all of the texts. We've got a guide for the further guide for the completion of the portfolio and the kind of work that students should be doing, and what's good and not good to include in it. We have got sample assessment materials, as I said before, so we've got 2 sets of those. We have got student work and portfolio exemplars for component 1. We have got lots of exemplars of student work for component 3 for each text over a number of years. We've got recorded support for component 3, which is done by the lead examiner and her team, where they are looking at some examples of work and discussing them. And we've got various training events that you can download and have a look at as well. I was going to attempt to take you on an actual tour of the website, but I'm slightly concerned about my technical prowess today. I've got a new laptop, so forgive me. But if you want me to do it at a later date, just let me know and I'll take you on a tour. That's my face. Very sorry about that. Those are my details. If you want to get in touch, that's the phone number that you can call. It may not get through to me. It may get through to one of my colleagues, but you can always ask to see if I'm available, and I'll be very happy to speak to you if I am. Live chat is a really useful way of communicating, because we can have a conversation without actually hearing each other's voices. Not that that's a bad thing, but sometimes, you just want to know a little bit of information, and I can give that to you. So when you go onto our website and go to the Contact Us section, there is a live chat option that you'll be able to use. Oh, sorry, I'm really sorry. I put the wrong web page there. I put the GCSE drama one. Please forgive me. We have a communities page as well on our website, which is really useful if you want to share any ideas or ask me any questions. I've got you can tweet me at Pearson Perf Arts. You can sign up to my emails, and also if you're on Facebook, there's a really good Facebook group which is Teachers of Edexcel Drama and Theatre, and I am often on there because people have realised that if they tag me in, then I will answer their questions. So thank you for joining today. I hope this has been useful. What I'm going to do is I'm going to send you all a recording of this afterwards, and I'll send you a copy of the slides as well. So that's likely to be tomorrow. And if you're listening to a recording of this, then please get in touch and I'll be able to send it through to you. I'll also put a copy on our communities page as well. So thank you so much for joining today. I hope I've given you everything you need. If there's anything else you have, any outstanding questions, then please let me know. Just email me or whatever. And good luck with your planning. Take care of yourselves. Thank you. Bye bye.